Happy New Year. Good deal. Can you give me a thumbs up just to show you've got sound coming through from me? Oh, excellent. Excellent. Good deal. Glad to have it all working well. Welcome. Welcome, guys. I am really excited about this. It's something we've been talking about doing for a very long time. It's something our clients have been asking us for a very long time. And so I'm glad that you're here now. Welcome to Back to Spring. So to give you a little bit of an idea of the genesis of this, why it's come about is that over time, many of our clients have said, hey, listen, I'm really on track, but I feel like I've drifted a little here, I've drifted a little there, or I've drifted more than a little over the holidays and that sort of stuff. And I know what to do to get back on track. I just feel like it might be a bit easier with a little support and a little community around me. And so that's kind of how many of you feel a little bit like that, by the way? Right. So here we are. And so in the past, the way we really dealt with this is that about once a year, we would run this kind of, WildFit reunion and just have people go through the entire program more than once. And that itself came as a surprise to us because when we created WildFit, we started seeing like clients sign up to do it again. And we were at first worried, like concerned, like, why are you signing up again? Did it all go? No. They said, it was just like, I did really well. And I came down a little, not as far as I was when I started. And I just wanted to, go through it again. And so that kind of led us to do these annual WildFit reunion events, which have been very successful. And all of that kind of culminated in the creation of the Back to Spring program. And so here we are. So what I want to do is I want to give you guys some advice on how to make sure this works really well for you. The one is that most of you are probably now joined up to the Facebook group. And as much as I want to encourage you to use Facebook and don't let Facebook use you. By the way, would any of you like to know the difference? The difference is that you're doing what you intended to do on Facebook. Then you are using Facebook. But if you are sitting there just going, then Facebook is using you. Right? So I don't like that we use our groups on Facebook because frankly, I'd love to get everybody off social media. It's just that it's like the telephone of today or something, right? So you're in the Facebook group, but be there to use it, not to be used by it. And what I mean by using it is that in that community, there are, I don't know how many of you, about 100, 150 of you in this particular Back to Spring class. And so connect with each other because what we have found absolutely is that connection and community is part of what keeps people on track and keeps people motivated. So make sure you get into the group and connect. I know most of you are already members of the WildFit community site and the Living WildFit, and that's fine. You should be there too. But for this challenge, let's gel together as a team. So I'd love to see you guys go in there, introduce yourselves, and share your experience as we go through this. Another way for you to get the most out of this is to really do it. Now, what I mean by that is that sometimes what happens to people is once they've seen the magic trick, they don't appreciate it as much anymore. And so some of you know a lot of the mental games and psychological principles and some of the things that make WildFit so successful. And so there's a chance that as you hear us talking about them, you might go, yeah, no, I've heard that before. Well, yes. But that's why you're here again, is to hear them again. I think it's Tony Robbins who always says repetition is the mother of skill. Like sometimes we need to hear something again and again and again, really to get it integrated. And so I really want you to, as best you can, approach this with a combination of fresh eyes and established student eyes. And what I mean by that is the fresh eyes is allow yourself to be the empty cup that's still taking information in. And then secondly, allow yourself to be the experienced student who says, yes, that worked for me last time. I can grab onto that. I didn't fully understand that last time, and so on. So that's the second thing. Third thing is interact on these live calls. And so be on as many of them as you can. I'm sure you've all had the schedule of them. I believe that I have it here myself. The calls are on, they're at 11 a.m. New York time. The reason we use New York time is not out of any preference for New York. It's just that in the past when we used like EST and PST and L3BST or whatever, the fact is that we have clients from so many countries around the world that we figured that either we would have to like list them all or just pick one central one. And so we've gone with New York. So it's based on New York time. And they're on January 7th, 11th, 14th, 21st, 28th, and on February 1st. And they're always at 11 a.m. New York time. I want to put to you, really do what you can to show up for those live calls. Even if you don't get to interact with me directly or one of the coaches, you already know this probably if you went through a coach class before. I know some of you maybe have never done this with a coach before and you just went through digitally. But let me tell you that even if you don't interact with the coach directly, watching the interactions that people have with the coaches is really, really powerful. Plus, you can interact in the chat and comments area with each other and with the support team and so forth. So I really want you to be engaged because, again, the old system of education, the old system where a teacher stood in front of the room and simply talked at an audience was really developed to prepare a generation for the industrial revolution, for working in factories and stuff. What we now know about the way people learn is that they need to be doing. And so what that means is we want you to be doing. And one of the ways to do with information is to immediately discuss and so if I ask a question, interact and answer the question in the chat. I'll try it right now. How many of you plan to interact when I ask a question? Just go ahead and let me know in the chat. Then I'll have an idea. That's what I'm talking about. Well done. I love when I see the chat roll scroll away like that. That's awesome. And equally, well done, everybody. And equally, if you've got questions, then go ahead and type them in there. And because you're going to get answers from me, from our support team, you're also going to get answers from each other because, hey, you've been through this before. And so there's going to be things that you've remembered that somebody else didn't, and so on. Mark, I'm really sorry about the cold and rainy in Milwaukee. I really am. I'm with you. I'm not with you presently. It's very warm and sunny here, but I will be flying to Calgary very shortly. And I think once I'm in Calgary, I'll probably would have appreciated warm and wet rather than freezing cold and snowy. Anyway, so those are my tips for how to get the most out of the program. So with that in mind, let's just jump in. And actually, one more thing before we jump in. And that is roughly the way these calls will be structured. In each week, we will be announcing the theme of that week or the enhancements that we're focused on for that week. And then after that, we'll be going into some interaction where, we'll be talking, you'll be talking with me or one of our coaches because they'll be, going through and answering your questions or helping you with anything you're struggling with and so forth. The idea of this program, for example, something you now know and didn't know when you did WildFit the first time, is that the objective of this program is to guide you back into spring. How many of you, I'm curious, how many of you often feel like you'd like to go to spring, you'd like to be in spring more often or maybe for a little longer, but to do it completely on your own is more challenging than you would like? How many people feel like that? Right. And that's what this is about. I will tell you that it's very much the same for me. I don't really like going into spring. It's really crazy. I don't enjoy it at all until about the second or third day. And I'm like, why don't I live like this all the time? And then, I do my spring for, somewhere between 2 weeks and 6 weeks. And then I come out and then I'm like, oh, I'll do it soon. I'll do it again soon. And then I have to really, and one of the ways that I do that is very often is getting involved in coaching a class and then writing the class with the students. And it kind of gets me into spring. This program, it's absolutely designed that you could do this once a year, twice a year, or maybe even 3 or 4 times a year to just get yourself back on track whenever you wanted to. So with that in mind, now that we know the call structures, let's talk about what we're going to be focused on this week. So the first thing is we're going to do something very similar to when we started WildFit. When you did your first week. You remember what it was like your first week? You showed up, maybe you were a little nervous, maybe you were a little excited, and then I or the video said to you, this week you are going to change nothing. And I know that some of you were like, whoa, what do you mean? And some of you were excited. Oh, thank God I don't have to change anything. And others were disappointed because you had binged your face off for the week leading up to the program. And now you're like, what do you mean? I have to keep eating like? And was there a range of emotions for you guys? I think probably, right? And so you already know some of the tricks in my tool bag, and I'm going to tell you that we're going to do something similar this week. And that is that this week, we're only going to be focusing on adding in water and fruit. Just adding in some water and fruit. Now, I know from experience, some of you are like, oh, I don't really like adding in a lot of fruit. You don't have to. It's optional. It is like this. If you find right now that you're having an issue with carbs, particularly sweet carbs, then I do recommend adding in some fruit. You guys already know the rules. Empty stomach, ideally first thing in the morning, and ideally not big mixes of fruit. Like I prefer to eat one species of fruit at a time. Yes, fruit salads can be really rewarding, but some fruits in combination are a little tougher to digest. Like melons combined with other fruits, for example, not ideal. And so fruit on an empty stomach, ideally first thing in the morning, ideally one fruit at a time. And when we say add it back in, add in as much as you would like or as little as you would like. The main issue here is that if you've kind of succumbed to some sweet things, particularly over the holiday, then we're introducing fruit at this point as a kind of a methadone to the heroin that is sugar. So you're going to introduce a little bit of fruit in the mornings. You're also going to increase your water intake, because unless you're already doing really well at it, you might be. But if you've slid a little in the water, has anybody slid a little in the water department maybe? There you go. Okay, so if you've slid a little in the water department, then you're going to step up and you're going to drink more water. So with that in mind, I'm going to drink. Drink a little bit more water. What we're talking about is 6 to 8 glasses of water a day. People always ask me, what size are the glasses? Well, if you're a bigger person, they're bigger glasses. If you're a smaller person, they're smaller glasses. I'm just using a general rule of thumb, 6 to 8 comfortable glasses of water per day to keep yourself hydrated. I feel like sipping water is more functional than gulping it. I feel like room temperature water is more supportive of healthy digestion and stuff like that than cold, but those are guidelines. You can figure that out for yourself. I'll tell you, I quite like icy cold water later in the day, but it's warm here. But I wake up in the morning and start with room temperature water. I just feel best that way. The other thing you're going to add in this week is breathing. Now, I know most of you have probably been breathing for most of the year so far. I'm going to guess that you've been doing breathing, but I'm going to guess that most of you have been doing automatic breathing, unconscious breathing, just breathing. And so for those of you who don't have a regular breath practice or don't have regular yoga, which forces a breath practice, then I'm going to ask you to go and use the WildFit 5-5-5 system. And the way that works is you breathe in for a count of 5, you hold for a count of 5, you breathe out for a count of 5, and you do that 5 times. And ideally, you do that 5 sets in the day at different times in the day. If any of you have a smartphone or a smartwatch or something like that, you can get an app that will actually remind you every couple of hours to breathe. And so then when I get it, I've got it right here. I've got the breathing app. It comes in, it tells me to breathe. I do my 5-5-5 breathing, and then I move on with my day. If you are too busy to do the 5-5-5 breathing, there's something's got to change. It's just breathing for about 30 seconds, right? A minute or so. It's not a big deal. So introduce your, so again, by recap, you're going to step up your water intake. You're going to add in some fruit in the mornings on an empty stomach. You're going to add in some conscious breathing on the 5-5-5 system, or if you've got your own breathwork practice, that's fine too. Whatever works for you, but you're going to get some solid conscious breathing. By the way, let me just communicate to you why. Quite aside from oxygen, I mean, that is a pretty good reason for breathing, I think, oxygen. I think it's a pretty good reason. But aside from that, there's another reason, and that is that deep breathing tells your cells that you are safe. Deep breathing tells your cells that you are safe. You see, maybe you've heard me speak about this. Certainly, if you've ever been at one of our live events, you will have, because I tell this a lot. But I want you to think about this. Our ancestors, you're walking along. They're walking along. You and I in a time machine 100,000 years ago, walking along. If we see a lion, how are we going to breathe in that moment? Probably not at all to begin with, right? And then after that, we're going to breathe very shallowly because we want to be quiet. When we breathe shallow in the top of our chest, we tell our system that the environment is dangerous. And that's how most people breathe unconsciously all the time and wonder why there's so much anxiety and stress and depression. A huge amount of it has to do with not breathing properly. That's why one of the reasons people feel so fantastic. They go, I don't want to go for a walk. I don't want to go for a run. I don't want to go to the gym. But then after they do all those things, how do they feel? Fantastic. One of the reasons they feel so good is the breathing, because when you breathe deeply, intentionally like that, you tell your body how safe you are. And your body likes that a great deal. For those of you who have weight loss as a goal for going into spring, I know that's for some of you, that's the case. I want to remind you that breathing plays an important role in weight loss. A, because it calms you down, it reduces your cortisol, it takes the stress away, and stress is a way of holding on to fat. And the other reason is that ultimately we breathe out fat. And that's where the fat goes. So we want to be breathing, nice, deep, concentrated breathing. And then the last thing we're going to add in is a little more movement. A little more movement. Now, I know some of you going, Eric, how could you do that to me? When we did WildFit last time, you said, don't do any exercise. Now you're telling me to move. Yeah, you've already done the WildFit challenge once. You know why we do it that way. And it's important, but this time, movement. And this is what I'm asking you to consider. How many of you have a smartphone of some kind? How many of you have a smartphone of some kind? Okay, almost all of you. You can count your steps every day without even thinking about it. Yeah, I mean, in the old days when we used to advise people about this, we even very nearly developed our own WildFit pedometers. Like we had a company in China that was getting ready to make them. They had the WildFit logo on them, the whole deal. And then I suddenly had this thought. I thought, you know what? I think every phone in the world is going to be able to do this. So we didn't do it. We didn't end up developing the product because in the end, we would have ended up with thousands of them sitting on a shelf because everybody has a pedometer now for free in their pocket. So here's my question for you. What's your step goal? What's your step goal every day? How many steps do you want to take? Because I want to remind you that your ancestors were forced to walk 10, 15, 20 kilometers or miles a day, every day, just to get their water and food requirements met. Now, we don't have to take those steps anymore, except that our body works better when we do. And so what I want you to think about is park at the back of the parking lot and walk in. Leave the spaces by the doors for the pregnant women and you know, for the families with small children. How about that? Leave those spaces for them and park at the back of the parking lot and walk in. Skip the escalator. And if you have no choice, because, you know, if you're in America, I don't even know if they know how to build stairs in America anymore. There's just escalators everywhere. But if you're in America and there's an escalator, walk up the escalator. It makes me think of this video I saw, these two people on an escalator, and the escalator came to a stop. And the one person turned to the other one and goes, oh man, do you have a cell phone with you? What are we going to do about this? On an escalator. It was, of course, a spoof. But the point is, I want you to really make sure that you get some movements in. I will tell you that my daily step goal is 10,000 steps. You do not need your step goal to be that much. You can pick. The way I would suggest you do it is this week, just count them. Just activate a pedometer on your phone if you haven't done it already, and just count your steps. Don't even try to increase them. But I'll tell you something. Once you see them, once you're counting them, you'll probably start unconsciously trying to increase them a little. And then by the end of this week, you'll know what your normal steps are every day. And you can say, all right, now I want to increase it a little bit next week. Does this make sense to you guys? All right. So we're going to breathe. We're going to drink water. We're going to add in some fruit on an empty stomach, and we're going to move more. And one more thing in moving, I highly recommend that the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning is have a nice glass of warm, like room temperature water, and stretch. Nothing serious. I'm not asking you to work out. Don't worry. I'm just saying, get up and stretch. I know some of you are way beyond this already. I know that, but I know others, you have been way beyond it, but you're not currently. And I know some of you, you haven't done it in a long time. And so when I say stretch, I'm talking about some basic things. I don't know how well you can see this on camera. Probably not at all. No, not really. But I'm talking about some basic things. Like simply, one of my favorite ones is I like to stretch out my shoulders, put my arms back like this, lean forward, and just open up my back and my shoulders. Just stretch, reach down, touch your toes or as close as you can get. You know, just do some basic stretching like that you can wake up your joints with. One really great little routine that I like, I've never really shared this with WildFit before because we haven't really been working on the exercise part of things, but there's a really nice little warm up that I got when I was doing Tai Chi many years ago. And all it is, it's really simple. It starts in your hands. And you just shake out your hands, shake out your wrists, just shake them out. And then when you've woken them up, you just go and you shake out your elbows, just turn them around in circles. Then it's your shoulders. When you've done your shoulders, then it's your neck. Get your neck in both directions, about 10 times each way. Then you can kind of do the hula hoop movement with your hips, wake up your hips, then move down and just rotate your knees around a little bit, then do your ankles. The whole thing takes 4 minutes. But the nice thing about it is it wakes up all the joints. And I'll bet You move better all day long. All right. So with that in mind, we know that we're adding in water, we're adding in fruit, we're adding in movement, we're adding in breathing. Now let's talk about our minds, because you'll notice we haven't subtracted anything. So the question now is, some of you are wondering, how far do I go with this? How far do I go? I mean, when you say I don't have to take anything out, what can I eat? Well, let me say this to you. Some people come into the first week of WildFit when we tell them not to change anything. And we say, don't change anything. And then what do? They eat a ton of junk. Now, we didn't say go and eat a ton of junk. We said don't change anything. But most people end up taking a big left turn and eating worse than they were before. That's okay. They're meant to do that. And so here's my question for you this week. This is my thought for you, at least, is that this week, I want you to eat what you want. But I don't want you to eat stuff that you don't want to eat. Remember that when you did WildFit the first time, if you had the vaguest desire to have ice cream, you had to go and have the ice cream. But if you're done with it, how many of you are done with ice cream? I'm curious, just done with it. Right. Then don't bring it back. You understand? So what I'm saying is that this week, the way you're going to eat is probably not as good as you were when you finished WildFit the first time, but not as bad as you were before you did WildFit the first time, right? It's going to be something else. And so if you're done with dairy, then don't bring it back unless you're fighting it daily with willpower. But if you're done with it, then don't bring it back. Does this make sense? So, like, for example, how many of you are completely done with soft drinks? I'm curious, how many are completely done with soft drinks? Right, don't bring them back. But if you're not done with them, if you're fighting them, if they're calling to you every day, then maybe you should. That's how you're going to play this week. So this week is going to be a little more permissive than you might usually be. Maybe you've been using a little willpower here, a little willpower there. And so you're going to let that go, but that does not mean going all the way back to the way you were before WildFit. By the way, how many of you, I'm curious, how many of you are okay, you're in the Back to Spring program, so clearly you're wanting a reset. But here's my question for you. How many of you are still vastly better than you were before you did WildFit the first time? That's like 99%. I'm assuming that it might even have been 100. I can't see all the screens refreshing, but so you understand what I'm getting at is that when I say this week not to eliminate anything, I'm asking you not to eliminate anything. If you were eating it last week, you should be eating it this week. But if you weren't eating it last week and the week before, if you haven't eaten it since you did WildFit, if you're done with it, you do not bring it back. You only go as far as you've been allowing yourself to go anyway. Is that clear to everybody? All right. So I'm looking at some of the questions, and then I'm going to go with hand raising or electronic hand raising if you have got questions at this point. I don't need to, I'm mostly going to be looking at questions. We'll do like feedback and intervention coaching stuff on the next calls. This one is mostly about you getting really clear about what this week is about. But I saw Angela says, I'm worried to bring fruit back since normally I get bloated when I have fruit. Having said that, I do still have some carb. Angela, what I might do in your case is be gentle. Like maybe just bring back some berries. If you can get some raspberries or strawberries or blueberries or something like that. And if you were feeling bloaty about fruit before, then here's some tips. Mono species. Eat one type of fruit at a time. Number 2, make sure your stomach really is empty. Like first thing in the morning is best. And number 3, slow down a little. Remember that our ancestors, they didn't have buckets. Right? So they went over to the bush and they ate as they picked, right? So they ate what was close and done. Now they got to climb up higher and so on. Whereas now what we do is we just go buy a bucket of it and just slam it down. And our digestive system many times doesn't like that so much. And so that might be part of what contributes to the bloating feeling. John, if you are already, the rest of you as well, if you are still doing, if you're still maintaining your Alka-Geyser habit, absolutely continue to have them this week. If you haven't been having them, don't add them back in this week. Great question, John. Thank you. All right. So any other questions that you guys want to go live with? Anybody have a fanatical hand raising that I want to see, or I don't see an electronic hand raising. Hold on. Maybe I do. Oh, electronic hand raising. Chuck, you are going to go live in a second here. Oh, you're live now. At least in theory you are. Chuck, hello. All right. I don't have Chuck for some reason, guys, if you guys can support. Anybody else with any questions or any just general thoughts or, maybe some general feedback about why you're here and what you want to get from it, anything at all. This is a time for us to get clear. So who's got questions? Oh, come on. Don't try to pretend I covered everything perfectly. I never do that. There's always questions. Angela, you can either do electronic or you can just wave like this and then I'll find you where I don't see you. Hold on. There we go. I see Ella. Angela, I will come back to you. I got Ella. Okay, Ella, you are live.
There's something that's not working with the electronic hand raise.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it says that you have it disabled. So I think people are probably trying to do it. So that's the first thing.
All right. My team, I hope you picked up on that. Let's try to either fix that for this time and or make sure it's set correctly next time. Thank you, Ella. What's your question?
Well, it's a question. So I did your Wildhood program starting in August, and I pretty much just kept to it. The holidays, I went off a little bit. But the question I really have is about, I listen to Ben Greenfield and I listen to Dave Avery, and, they're all pumping out information about different supplements like L-theanine. And I know that you said when we did the 90-day challenge, don't worry about doing any supplements because you're getting all you need through your food. So I guess that's really I want to know what your stance is on that.
Supplements are, I have the benefit of being a business guy long before I created WildFit and having a marketing head. And so I know a lot about the way things are, marketed. And I know that one of the things that happens is that sometimes when you have a product you want to sell, what you do is you create a market for it. I'll give you a really good example. This is kind of a funny story, but Levi's, we'll probably all be familiar with Levi's. At one point they had these old farmer jeans, just straight-legged farmer jeans. Nobody wanted them except farmers. They were called, they had a particular model number. I don't want to share the model number with you because it'll give away the punchline. But one day somebody went and ordered 100,000 of them. And they just, a lot of times people think zero doesn't mean a lot. But man, when you add a zero to 100,000, yeah, it changes things pretty dramatically. And so instead of ordering 100,000 jeans, they ordered 1 million. And all of a sudden they were in serious trouble if they couldn't figure out how to sell these jeans, and they didn't have enough farmers to sell 1 million jeans to. So what did they do? Well, marketing is almost always the solution to any problem. And so they went and hired really good marketers, and the marketers came along and said, you know what we'll do is we'll just make the Levi's 501 sexy. And so the Levi 501 jeans became the sexiest jeans in the world for a while, and they sold their 1 million jeans, and it became one of the most popular brands. I will put to you that that is the story with most supplements. I'm sorry, I hate to be so jaded. I hate to be so conspiracy minded, but that is the story with the vast majority of supplements. And now that's not to say that all supplements are bad. I will put to you that I'm a big fan these days of people making sure that they do get iodine as a supplement, or that they do get magnesium as a supplement, particularly when they're doing really healthy eating and they're eating a lot of cruciferous vegetables and so forth. Because when you're eating cruciferous vegetables, you have a hard time taking in magnesium. And so magnesium supplementation is a good idea. But here's the kicker. We actually absorb magnesium even better through our skin than we do through our digestive tract. So rather than taking an oral supplement, we're better off to actually have a magnesium gel or magnesium bath. But the magnesium oral supplement people aren't necessarily going to put that to you. If you look in the news cycle about, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago, this is mainstream news, right? I mean, who knows what's real these days, but mainstream news was reporting that scientific studies were finally demonstrating that oral vitamin D supplements were nigh on useless. They were doing nothing. The way you get your vitamin D is by spending some time in the sun. But unfortunately, since 1963, when the sun turned evil, according to some marketers trying to sell skincare products, right? Trying to sell sunblock. Now, again, the sun can burn you. Don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that the sun doesn't have harms to it. But again, what happened is now marketers came along and said, we can sell sunblock by vilifying the sun. And so people started hiding from the sun en masse. And guess what? Vitamin D deficiency all over the place. So you're not going to fix that by taking a pill. So what I'm really getting at is that my take on supplements is that the vast majority of them are being sold on fear. And so, you know, they're not being sold on actual research. They're not being sold on checking your body and saying, oh, you have an issue, let's supplement for that. Most of them being sold on, you might have a deficiency. And if you do have a deficiency, these are the following things. And so as a consequence, people become afraid and then they feel like they need a supplement. Now, my take is this: the first thing to do is to eat really well and move really well and drink really well and so forth, right? That's the first thing. Then if you're concerned symptomatically that you're low on something, I'll give you an example. If you're having leg cramps, particularly when you go into spring, if you're having leg cramps, I will tell you the odds are there's a magnesium problem. There's a symptom, therefore we can test and we can say, ah, yes, there's a magnesium problem. And so that's what I would suggest, is that first we eat well, then we observe for any problems, or we go get tested. And if at that stage we come up and go, oh, look, there's a deficiency, then we either at that point find a real life, a whole life way of solving it. I say whole life in the sense that it might be food, it might be lifestyle. And if after that we still have a measured deficiency, then maybe we take a look at getting the best possible supplements we can. That's my take.
So like even things like I just was at my doctor and she said, make sure you're taking your calcium and your collagen and your vitamin D3. And then, you know, there's other people in this field that have a lot of great advice, and, you know, a lot of them are on Mindvalley too. And it's like, I start getting hyper, like, oh my God, should I be taking that? I have to take an L-theanine every time I drink my 1 cup of coffee. If I forget, I'm going to be hyper. And so I am following WildFit, and I only bought the L-theanine, and that was Dave Avery's fault. So,
you know, look, it's a tricky world out there, and I imagine that most of the people out there, individual people that are selling supplements, very much believe in them, and they may well be useful supplements. I'm suggesting that the clue is in the word. Supplement means in addition to. It does not mean in replacement of. And unfortunately, most supplements these days are being sold in replacement of, not in addition to.
You would say that even for women in like late 40s and 50s that are heading towards menopause or in menopause, you don't need calcium supplements? That just makes me a little.
No, Ella, what I'm saying is, and I want to be very careful about making a medical prescription about your particular need for calcium supplements. What I would suggest to you is that remember that the average person in the Western world right now is eating a diet that causes calcium deficiency for them. Right? That's what the average person is doing. So bear in mind that the average person that your doctor is seeing is low on calcium, and that's showing up as bone density problems and hip fracture and, you know, whatever. So the average person that your doctor is seeing does have a calcium problem. And the doctor, who incidentally, your doctor likely didn't study food at all. I mean, I don't mean that. It's not your doctor's fault. It's the medical education system, but your doctor did not study food in all likelihood. And so what your doctor did study is the latest brochure that was sent to them from the company that's getting them to sell calcium supplements for them.
Right.
And so my suggestion to you is that the very best way to make sure that you're getting appropriate levels of calcium is to eat known, healthy, human diet-based calcium-rich foods and long periods of alkalinity, right? When somebody eats a very acidic diet, their body borrows calcium from the bones to balance the acidity, causing weakening bones no matter how many supplements you take. In fact, milk is such a great version of that. Milk is packed chock full of calcium, and yet the highest milk drinking countries in the world have the highest level of hip fracture and osteoporosis in the world. Well, why? Because milk is coming in and causing acidity, and that acidity is causing the body to borrow calcium from the bones, which is weakening the bones. And if those people were living a normal, cyclical, seasonal life, they would then move to a season of eating a lot of greens and having a more alkaline time. And during that time, their body would repay the calcium back to the bones, irrespective of a calcium supplement. So that's my opinion. If you have a medical professional telling you should have calcium supplements, then you should either do what they say or get a second opinion from somebody who's trained. And I don't want to overly state my position. I am not a 40 to 50-year-old woman going through that exact experience myself, and I can't tell you I've tested on my body. I can tell you that as a man, I have tested on my body, and it's worked like this. I drank milk like a fiend as a kid. I did all the time. In fact, I was allergic to milk for a little while when I was a child. And then I started drinking milk all the time, and I was breaking bones every 6 months. Many of them fingers in my various hands. We can figure out how that might have happened. I may have been prone to the occasional temper tantrum, but I broke arms and legs and whatnot. And here's what's crazy, Ella. I gave up milk when I was 21 years old. And since I was 21 till today, I've broken one bone. Remember, I was breaking bones annually when I was drinking milk, which is a calcium supplement, right? So then I move over and I've broken one bone since I was 21. And don't think for a minute that I became less rambunctious when I became 21. I am an avid kiteboarder. I'm fascinated by martial arts. I'm horseback riding. I mean, I'm an active person. And the bone that I did break, incidentally, I broke it barefoot rock climbing on a waterfall in Tanzania, free climbing, and I fell off the waterfall and broke a toe. Nothing else. So I guess all I'm really trying to say to you is be aware of the marketing. There's two ways to know that you might potentially need a supplement. One is you've gone and had a test done, and the test has shown that your numbers are low. I am always skeptical of those tests because, of course, who set the numbers?
Right.
I don't know. And so, but that's one way. And then the other way is there is a symptom that you are experiencing that is indicative of a dysfunction somewhere that is then tested and proven. For example, muscle cramps, tested, low on magnesium. Let's do something about it.
I gotcha.
Make sense?
No, it makes total sense. And I mean, I'm just eating Wild Fit and I feel amazing. So I'm like, why do I need to take extra stuff? I just wanted to know what you thought.
Hey, that's how I feel. And I will put to you, I will be 49 years old shortly. And I have all the energy in the world. I've got in all the ways that 49-year-old men are worried about being 49. I'm not worried about those things. I'm not like they talk about testosterone levels dropping. I'm not worried. I'm conscious of it. I think about it, but I pay attention and I'm in good shape. And I don't take supplements. I will occasionally, I go for body work at this place called the Body Temple down here where they do fascial stretching and stuff. Mm-hmm. And they have water that's treated with magnesium. And I will occasionally drink their water. And I noticed that after I drink their water, I don't have leg cramps for weeks after that because it's got magnesium in it. So when I say I don't take supplements, what I mean is I don't have a cabinet full of bottles. I don't rattle when I walk. Ella, thanks very much. Very thought-provoking question. Excellent. Good to have you here.
Thank you.
Okay, you have Angela.
Hey, Angela, go for it.
Okay, hi, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. So I have a question here that's more related to self-talk and psychology, which honestly, that's one of my favorite parts about WildFit is how amazing you are at that. So because I've been in Deep Spring before, I noticed that I have negative self-talk come up when it comes to eating things that I might otherwise think are healthy, like carrots and sweet potatoes, things like that, which like the average person would say are healthy. But because at one point in Deep Spring, I labeled them as quote bad, I noticed that I get anxiety when I eat them today. And I wonder if that is at all affecting like even how my body processes it, right? Because it's kind of like why you recommend the deep breathing, where if your body's in this state of anxiety, then you're going to hold on to the extra weight. Do you know what I mean? So yes. I'm wondering if you have any suggestions for how to quiet the type of self-talk that comes with that.
It's just 2 words. You might want to write them down. It's just 2 words. Just write them down. So when you're thinking of eating carrots and then you think they're bad, here you go. You ready? Stop it. Just stop doing that. What? They're not bad. They're out of season.
Right.
All right. They're out of season. By the way, that was borrowed from Bob Newhart.
I know. I've seen it. It's the best YouTube video. Good.
So it's, but but I quite literally mean it. And if you keep doing it, I will bury you alive in a box. Like you again, guys, inside joke if you don't know the Bob Newhart skit, but Angela, seriously, I get what's happened is that you during that time labeled it as bad. And all I'm asking you to do is recognize that they're wonderful for you. They're absolutely fantastic for your eyesight. And in fact, now you've said that I'm going to try and hunt myself down some today. I haven't had carrots in a little while. It's time. They're really good for you. What I want you to think about when you go into deep spring is not the good, bad question. It's the in-season, out-season question. And so that's the dialogue you have with yourself is when you look at carrots and you're going, oh, I really would like a carrot right now. They're out of season. They're just out of season right now. I've chosen to be in this season. They're out of season. Does that help?
Yeah, no, it totally does.
That's what you want to do is think of it in terms of season. Remember also WildFit. I want to touch on something that you just raised, which is really important. You know, my wife is a big fan of Abraham Hicks. How many of you guys are familiar with Abraham Hicks? I'm curious. Quite a few. All right. So my wife's a big fan, and I was not, but when my wife and I first started dating, she said, I'm going away on a cruise with Abraham Hicks for 2 weeks. And, if you want to be with me, you're going to have to come on that cruise. And I'm like, oh God, all right, I'll go. And, and so I went, and what I found disturbing to me was that, I could very rarely ever find something that Esther said or that Abraham said that I could disagree with. I wanted to find things to disagree with and I couldn't. And then one day I did find one version of it. And that was, and I think we have to find a middle ground. And here's what I'm talking about. You asked the question of, if I have, say, some negative thoughts about carrots when I'm eating them, does that potentially affect the way I take them in? I would say yes. I would say yes. And so, what Esther was saying is, look, if you eat chocolate cake and feel good about eating chocolate cake, then the chocolate cake won't be so bad for you. And I now agree with her with this proviso. Won't be so bad for you. It'll still be bad for you. But if you eat the chocolate cake with guilt, then it's way worse for you. Whereas, as you now know from WildFit, that we're really about food freedom, which means, hey, if you still want to have chocolate cake, then you find a way to have it sometimes. I can tell you one way is to find a really good, a chef that knows how to cook with, great, non-wheat ingredients and non-dairy. There are ways to do that. But then even then, there's no way that you're going to there's no way that you're going to make a tasty chocolate cake that's actually good for you, at a physical level. It's just not, I don't believe that can happen. But I do believe that you can find a chocolate cake that isn't so terrible for you, and you might want to have it as a treat. If you're going to do that, do it without the guilt. And then it won't be so bad for you. Does this make sense? And so, yeah, Angela, I think it's super important that you get okay with carrots and just recognize them as being in or out of season.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Eric.
You're very welcome. Glad to have you here. Who's next?
Next, we have Sabine or Sabina.
Hello, Sabina.
Good morning. So here I have a question for you. I've done this now 3 times, both with Leafy and Melody, who are kick-ass, work hard. I mean, it was spectacular. Really, I wanted just a shout out to those two. They added something that you don't have because they're both women, and it made a difference to me. So just want to say that. Again, no offense to men, but I want to exercise. I get tired of the WildFit spring don't exercise because I really want to build some muscle. I'm a ballroom dancer. I want to really do more than just walk 10,000 steps.
Don't even worry about that. Listen, let me tell you guys, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. All right. I'm going to let you in on a secret in case you ever want to create a coaching program. WildFit may be one of the most successful coaching programs ever created. I don't mean that out of any self-aggrandizing or what have you. How many of you are familiar with Mindvalley? How many of you guys know Mindvalley? So do you know the Mindvalley Quest platform? How many of you are familiar with Mindvalley Quests? The entire Quest platform was stimulated by WildFit. Vishen did WildFit and said, holy cow, at day 66, I'm still in this program. And I've never done that before. What is it that Eric's doing differently that we can add to our education platforms? That's why they created the Quest platform. So I'm going to give you one of the clues as to what makes WildFit work so well. And that is minimum opportunities to fail. Minimum opportunities to fail. If you can fail the first week of WildFit, you are some kind of genius, right? You can't fail that first week, and it's really tough to fail the second week, and it's not so easy to fail the third week. In fact, it gets kind of tough to fail at all. And one of the reasons for that is that we created minimum opportunities to fail. That is one of the reasons that we eliminate exercise as a requirement of WildFit. The other reason we eliminate it is for people that are highly focused on weight loss. Intensive exercise doesn't support that. So those are the two reasons we removed it. If you are now in muscle building phase and you want to work out through spring, you work out through spring. Experiment. Find how you feel about it. Some people will find they have incredible surges of energy and they're incredibly good at working out during spring. And by the way, Sabina, here's the great news. There's a ton of science out there on keto, right, which is what we're achieving during spring, and muscle building and adding weight. And so you absolutely can do it. The only reason it was removed in the WildFit challenge initially is minimum opportunities to fail, and it's not so supportive of weight loss.
Well, and that's my problem, because I do want to lose 50 pounds and build some muscle. So I feel like I'm working against myself.
Well, then it's really simple. Then what you want to do is heavy amounts, if you want, of aerobic exercise. Aerobic exercise, no anaerobics. You will build muscle doing aerobic exercise, not as quickly as anaerobics, but you will also burn fat. If you go to anaerobic, you will stress your body and you'll make it tougher to lose fat, in my opinion. Okay. So what does that mean? Long walks, even running, doing like intense yoga classes. I'm a big fan. I am not a fan of Bikram Choudhury, but I am a big fan of Bikram yoga that he created. And so it's a super intensive 90-minute yoga class in a hot room. I'm telling you, you want to create flexibility, build muscle, cleanse out your system. It's fantastic. So you absolutely are free to exercise during the Back to Spring program. We will hear from you how that goes, but you're free to do it. All I'm saying is if weight loss is a goal, I would avoid anaerobic workouts.
Okay.
Cool?
Yep. Thank you.
All right. Who's next? This is fun.
Next, we have Candida.
Candida, hi, how are you?
Oh, I'm trying to unmute her, and I can't on my end. Candida, can you unmute yourself?
I just unmuted myself. Can you
There
hear me?
she-
All
yes.
right. I actually have two questions. One is regarding meat, which I overdid while I was in Munich. And I would love to do this, going back to spring, using beans instead of meat. What do you think of that? And the other one is I signed up for the longevity quest with Ben Greenfield, who does anaerobic exercise, but only once a week. But so anyway, I'm trying to figure out how to combine those goals with WildFit.
Okay, so a couple of things. I'm with you. You know, I think there's an important thing to address here, and that is meat eating. You know, we are meat eaters. Of that, there's no doubt. I hate to say that because I know every now and again, I never would have thought it, but we have a huge vegan fan base in the WildFit community, and I wouldn't have thought that because, you know, we're generally pro eating meat, and that's not generally a very vegan compatible world. But what we are also big fans of is periods of veganism. For example, I have not now had meat in almost a week of any kind. No meat, no fish, no nothing for almost a week. I just do that every now and again. I recognize that my ancestors wouldn't have necessarily been that lucky to be able to hunt that regularly. And I also recognize that when meat is readily available, it's such an easy choice. And it wasn't like that for our ancestors. Our ancestors would have to make the choice between readily available vegetables and risking their lives to go hunting. So, you know, they wouldn't have necessarily done that every day, right? And so I think it's important to take breaks. The problem with beans is that beans are far from ideal from a digestive perspective. Yes, of course they've got proteins in them, but the fact is they're also heavy in carbs. This is incidentally why they cause gas, because the combination of the proteins and carbs in one causes a conflict in the digestive system, and then you produce more gas than you might normally want. But the other thing with most beans is that you must soak them or cook them, most of them, in order to get the toxicity out of them for you to be able to eat them. That doesn't mean the toxicity is out of them. It means that you've removed enough toxicity to remove the like acute symptomology. It doesn't mean you're not taking in a bunch of the toxins. So I am not a big fan of replacing meat with beans. What I'd rather say to you is that there's no need of meat on a day-to-day basis. Okay. You know, I think that the requirement for meat for humans, I mean, honestly, we know that apparently we can store B12 in our liver for, in some cases, up to years. No kidding, years you can store B12. This is incidentally, you know, 85% of the people who attempt veganism stop. And you know where they stop? Around 3 years. Why? They're out of B12. And I'll tell you one of the symptoms, this is kind of interesting. One of the symptoms of running low on B12 is aggressive personality disorders becoming difficult. And I suspect that was largely by design, that as you ran low on B12, you'd become more aggressive, and then that would assist you in hunting. These days, what it's done is it's taken a bunch of people in the vegan world and made them militant, right? And you know, it made them actually difficult to communicate with and have a real conversation with. So what I'm saying to you is, if you want to do this exercise and not take in a lot of meat during this time, I think you can do that. Whether I would replace that meat with beans that's more circumspect for me. I mean, if you can, you know, there are some beans that you can eat completely raw. I'd be more inclined to go in that direction. I'd also consider nuts. Nuts are super high in fats and proteins like meat. I would consider nuts. But the other thing I would consider is just reduce the amount of meat. You know, don't necessarily have it every single day if you don't want to. I would say for most people, when they go into spring, they should probably eat meat like all the way through spring. But then when they're done, they might want to take a break from meat entirely, like I'm doing right now. So I hope some of those things give you some ideas as to what to do.
Well, it just seemed like I would start craving meat and end up eating animal protein 3 times a day. And it's just too much.
It is. And this is a difficult issue. You see, we only have cravings. There's only really, you can break cravings up in a few ways. Cravings can be looked at like this. There are cravings that you've been taught to have, and there are cravings that you instinctually have.
Mm-hmm.
And where they get difficult is when they get combined. So cravings we've been taught to have is things like, popcorn at the movies. We've been taught to have that craving, right? It's not a natural craving. We've been taught to have a variety of different cravings like that. I use the popcorn one because it's pretty universal across all the countries. But if we're in America, we might talk about Snickers bar cravings for Hostess potato chips that has been bought and paid for. If we're in Holland, we might talk about, if we're in the Netherlands, we might talk about the craving for French fries with mayonnaise, right? That's a bought and paid for craving. But the French fries with mayonnaise one's difficult because it's built upon 2 natural cravings, salt and fat.
Yeah.
Salt and fat are natural cravings, and meat plays into the salt and fat craving, and meat itself is a craving. And the funny thing about our natural cravings is the only things that we crave are things that were good for us and rare. This is why we don't really crave green leafy vegetables, because they weren't so rare. They were available all the time. We don't really crave them so much. But we crave sugar because fruit was good for us and rare. We crave fat and salt because it was good for us and rare. And so what I would say is, when you've got the craving coming up, you got to check in with yourself and say, when was the last time I, quote, went hunting? And if you went hunting this morning, then you don't necessarily want to have more meat that same day. But I wouldn't even worry about having it 3 times in one day. What I'd be worrying about is having it every day.
Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, when you're in spring, you can have pretty much as you want during that time. But when you come out of spring, then I would suggest it's a really good idea to go down. And some of you might be happy. How many of you are happy with meat, like say once a week? How many of you feel like that?
Mm-hmm.
I say give it a try. I think meat once a week is excellent. But if you're highly active, you know, then you might want to consider having a little bit more. I'll give you one other thing to think about, especially when it comes to anaerobic exercise. One of the best ways I think to eat meat is to go out and do a really intensive workout to simulate hunting, and then eat meat. But what most of us do is we're very sedentary. We don't do any hunting at all, and then we eat meat, and maybe that's not so ideal. So I hope that gives you some food for thought. Excuse the pun.
Yeah, that really helped. Thank you. I appreciate
Good deal.
it.
All right. Now, guys, we're in our final 5 minutes. So I want to leave you with the final thoughts. This week, you are paying attention to your psychology. You will remember this from the first week that you did WildFit, but I want you to remember this. I want you to remember the food timeline. Remember the food timeline. Before you decide to eat something, how do you feel? Once you've made the decision to eat it, how do you feel? Once it's sitting in front of you and you're about to eat it, how do you feel? As you take the first bite, how do you feel, and how does it really taste? As you take the second and third and fourth bites, do you notice that you seem to disappear into another world? Are you still tasting it? Did it really taste as good? How did you feel an hour later? How did you feel a few hours later, maybe the next day? I want you to really pay attention to that entire food timeline and really check in with yourself to create increased food consciousness. I know that some of you Some of you are in this program and you're very good with all your foods. You haven't let any of the bad foods back in at all. And so this exercise won't be nearly as important to you. But I know also from some of you that you've had a little bit of a slide and there are some foods that you don't feel free of anymore. That's what we're talking about here. Paying real attention. If it's a food you don't feel free from, paying attention to that food timeline. Remember the food angel and the food devil. Listen in on them. You don't have to listen in on them when they're talking about healthy foods. You don't have to do that. But you do have to listen in when they're talking about healthy foods out of season. Luckily, that's not this week. This week, you only need to listen to the food angel and the food devil to the degree that they're asking you to eat stuff. Because as much as we're not making any changes this week, you might find that as I've told you to not eliminate anything that, I thought ice cream was out, and then the food devil might come up. And this is really key. Pay attention to the dialogue. Pay attention to how you're feeling. Does all of this make sense to you? Okay, remember those psychological games. And again, this week, if the food devil's if the food devil's seriously knocking on your door to get you to have something, then you're probably meant to have that thing. And unlike the first time you did WildFit, where I'm saying you can just haul out the Eric card every time, this is a little more like the buffer zone. I'm asking you not to bring something back in unless it was already in last week. But if the food devil's really asking you to do it, you're going to have to figure that out for yourself. Right? Again, this is about getting you to self-sustaining so that you are able to live this lifestyle ever, ever stronger, ever, ever better with ever increasing food freedom. With that, congratulations. Welcome to Back to Spring. Welcome to the new year. Happy New Year. And I will see you on our next call. One thing I wanted to point out to you, many of you already know Ariel. Ariel, are you with us? Ariel.
Yes, sir.
Good deal. I'm going to introduce you. Ariel is your second coach on this class. So you have two really great coaches supporting you on this, me and Ariel. And so Ariel will be there to answer your questions when you're chatting. Some of you have already seen her answering you. She'll be there to answer questions in the Facebook group, and she will be taking some of the live calls with you guys as well. So please, please welcome Ariel and know something about her. Ariel is, she was already a very, food and health focused long before she stumbled upon WildFit. And she has just refined her knowledge. She's contributed a great deal to what WildFit has become. She's brought some fabulous recipes to the fray. She even came here and lived in our house and taught Elise and our staff how to cook. Like, she's a very brilliant woman, and you guys are really, really lucky to have her on this class with you. So I appreciate all the welcoming for Ariel. Ariel, please say a few words if you'd like.
Just that I'm really excited to be here with you all, and thank you so much, Eric. It's been a pleasure.
You're very welcome. Glad to have you here. Welcome, everybody. Happy New Year. See you on the next live call. See you in the Facebook group. Have fun this week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Everyone.
Bye.
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 Yeah.
That's right.